Good afternoon. Can everybody
Hello.
hear me okay?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing well. Can everybody hear me okay?
I
Yes, ma'am.
can.
Clock 11:57 Central Time. So we'll give everybody 3 more minutes to log on. But if you guys have specific questions that you know of, go ahead and put them in the chat box. And that way I can have them there to make sure that I answer them as we go along. What is the weather like where you guys are?
It's fine where I'm at. Nice.
Nice.
I think it's probably the same here. I'm in Baton Rouge.
Okay, yeah. I'm in Baton Rouge too. I'm looking outside and it looks pretty. It's a little glary. It's not like a bright sunny day or anything, but it's not what we had last week.
Right. It's not because yesterday it was so bright and pretty.
It was pretty yesterday.
I don't really have a specific question, but do you have any tips on like how to study and prepare for the exam?
Yeah, I'll definitely be talking about that. About best ways to prepare. Um, and then I see the note that um you put on here about systems perspective in chapter 14, and we can talk about that too. Um, my plan for today, I'll pull up, just in a few minutes, but is to give us some good time to just kind of talk out these questions first, and then I have questions that are from the final exam um, kind of bucket of questions that we can go through and work together and kind of talk through what it what the process would be like whenever you're going through and how to kind of make decisions about answers and things like that.
You know what? I think that I'm learning like getting over time. I have learned a better way as far as answering questions because I guess when I just have to make sure I pay attention and read clearly of what it's asking
Right, right.
before
And
I answer.
yeah. Yeah, so to read the whole question, all of the parts, and not want to kind of jump in to answer it first.
Right, because sometimes I notice it can be similar or just is not an answer, but sometimes it's like okay, well, you ask for just say if you ask for the least effective or the and then it's like okay well you said the least so I didn't you have to make sure I put that option and not just any option that's related to that the question
Right,
like
right.
no
I
that's not
agree.
what you asked for.
I agree with you, and I get like that because then I'll be looking at the time, and then the time throws me off with reading thoroughly. So I had that issue.
Right.
But in chapter 14, even the questions, the last quiz, I'm still struggling trying to find the revision answers, and I'm like, okay, so many times I can read, and I don't know if I'm not applying or I'm not reading correctly. I just don't know about that chapter
You
itself.
know what?
And we can go through chapter 14 specifically too. I have time built in today for us to really kind of focus on the things that the people who are coming today, if you have specific questions. So we can take a look at chapter 14 together. Um, and we can, actually look at the questions too if you want to. This is I don't have your name on here, just iPhone, but it's Angela, right? Am I right?
Yes, yes, because
Yay!
I had to put it. That's me.
I'm impressed with myself because usually, even with in-person classes, I'm pretty bad about remembering people's names, but I got you.
Right.
All right. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We might have some people trickle in. I know that there are some people who emailed me who said that they were interested that I don't see on here, and maybe they ended up not being able to join us. But this is going to be recorded so that your classmates who are unable to attend at this time can view this and get the same information that you guys are getting. All right, so my plan for today, is to do kind of an overview of the final exam to tell you, kind of what to expect as far as the layout goes, number of questions, timed, that sort of thing. Then we can have some open time to do questions and answers about the final exam. If you have questions about the reflection project too, we can talk about those. And then I have at least one question for each of the chapters we can go through. Um, is there anything that you're not sure if we're going to cover that you have other questions about? No? Okay. Um, all right. So to give you can you guys see the screen okay? Y'all can see all the words on there?
Yes, I
Yeah.
can.
Great. So there's going to be 50 questions. It's all multiple choice. So whereas in some of the quizzes we had short answer and true false, we're just going to have multiple choice questions. And the reason that I have done this with multiple choice is because on your licensing exams, whenever you graduate, that is the format that they're in. And so I try to have one assessment measure in my classes that uses this format. And I think the final exam is a great place to kind of practice your test taking habits, because that exam is timed, and it's multiple choice. And like I've mentioned before, I know that there are really other ways that we can assess your knowledge and your skills, that might even be better ways than multiple choice quizzes or tests. And the reason for at least sticking with some of it is not only like a time saving measure, it's of grading, it's to prepare you guys for your licensing test. So it is an intentional choice to have you do a multiple choice exam like this. Um, One thing that's a little bit different, so with the quizzes, to kind of offset the balance of it not being a perfect assessment method, um, I gave you guys the options of revisions. And with the final exam, there are no options for revisions. However, I will throw out bad apple questions, is what I call them. So I'll kind of go through and see what if there's questions that a lot of people missed, that sort of thing. And if there are, usually my standard is, if half or more of the students missed it, then I throw it out. It is timed. There will be 2 hours for you to take the test. It's open note and open book, just like your quizzes. But you should, when you click on that link to take the exam, be prepared because it is timed and you'll only have that one opportunity or one take for the exam. And then lastly, no collaboration. So you're expected to take the final exam independently. Um, I think this might be a good time to answer your question about how to prepare for the final. So, the first thing is to think about what prepared you the best for studying for your quizzes. Because whatever method worked best for you for that is likely to continue to be a good method for the final, since it'll be very similar to the quizzes. Um, I also recommend that you review the questions that you and your classmates have generated that are in the extra credit tab and the final exam tab on Moodle. Those will probably pop up on the final. The questions from our chat today might be actual questions that come up on the final. So those are some great tools for practicing. And then I also would kind of go back to each chapter and at least do, an eyeball read is what I call it. So to scan each page, to look and to maybe read the summaries, to read the headings, to kind of familiarize yourself and refresh your memory. Um, It'll be equally distributed between all of the chapters, the questions will. So there isn't really one particular chapter you should study more than in other. Except I would advise that you may find that you need to review the earlier chapters more, because they're not as fresh in your memory. Um, but also it may be the opposite for you, because you maybe having that much time to process things has made you understand those concepts better, but the later concepts not as much, since you haven't had as much time to think about those. Um, so the answer, like lots of answers in social work, is it depends. um, it depends on you and what's been working for you. But those are some kind of general strategies to think about. Does that answer your question, Jasmine?
Big classmate
Yes,
question
it does.
today. Heading for time.
It does. It gave me a good little head start.
Okay, cool. And Julie and Emily, hello. I saw that you guys joined. You haven't really missed anything yet. If you guys have specific questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. That's kind of what I'm going to be looking at for questions. And we're going to, we just went through the overview of what the final exam will look like. And the next part of today, I have open for questions and answers. And it doesn't mean that we have to go in this order. But I wanted to put it at the beginning, so I made sure that we had time to talk and answer your specific questions before we just went into a general overview. So one thing I have on the list to talk about is the systems perspective and chapter 14. Are there any other areas that you guys want to talk about a little bit more? All right. Well, I will start there then with with the systems perspective and with chapter 14. Um, I so for the systems perspective, I'm glad if you're kind of struggling with that you brought this up, because systems perspective is really a core perspective for social work. And it's one that kind of sets us apart from other helping professions, that we look at the whole system. So we're not just looking at that one person, but we're looking at all of the influences around the person too. And so that means that the target of our interventions too are not always just the person. So, for example, in psychology, their interventions are much more focused on the person and those person dimensions that we talked about in this class with, the biological, the psychological, the social, the spiritual. But for social workers, we look at the environment too. And so that's really the biggest part about the systems perspective is, in social work at least, is, framing interventions. So what is I have another question that came up. So what is your advice when, okay. So what's my advice on if there are different theories and frameworks that could fit in multiple perspectives, and the book doesn't really give a definite answer. So that is something that in real life, just in real social work practice, that's going to happen for sure. And it's not always there aren't always red flags or shiny lights around what theory or perspective is highlighted. And so it can be kind of difficult to pinpoint that. And in real life, we would say, it depends, and that there are, perspectives that are there theories that borrow from multiple perspectives. And you may actually see, on the chart that some of the theories that are listed under a certain perspective might show up on other perspectives because they are informed by both. For the exam's sake, though, like with test taking strategies, I would, encourage you to think about what you think the question is asking you, what is, and what is emphasized in the question. So, for example, if, reinforcement is emphasized in a question, then it would be more likely to be the behavioral perspective that's related to it. But you could probably, explain reinforcement in a way that it could fit other perspectives. But but that key word like reinforcement goes with behavioral, the behavioral perspective. And I think that Julie and Emily, you might have missed this at the beginning, but one of the reasons why we have a multiple choice exam for this for this is to help you guys to prepare for the licensing board exams. In most, if not all states, it is a multiple choice test. And so it's good to get into the habit of practicing this and, not only thinking about the content of the course, but also practicing these, kind of test taking strategies for multiple choice tests. So does does that help answer? Okay, great. um I think Angela, you had asked about the systems perspective. That did that help you answer the questions you have about that, or do you have other specific questions about systems?
I guess it was just in general. I guess the target word would be it covers the environment. So I guess when I look at systems, I guess I look at environment. I don't know.
Right. And another thing that comes up with systems is thinking about how, if you change one system, then it can make changes in the other systems. Also how there are internal systems and external systems. So, um, that a person is not, there's subsystems even within the person. So, like when we talk about the biological person and all of our um, physical systems that make us up. Um, but I think that for social work, the most important thing about systems perspective is how it distinguishes us, and how it can inform our interventions. So for chapter 14, you were saying that there were some questions on this last quiz that were kind of confusing, or you weren't really able to
Yes, let me get them.
they were.
If I press them, I'm not sure. I don't think I found them.
Do you
I
wait?
was looking for them. I was saying I think I had them written out. Here they go.
Okay.
It's like 5 too. Like I just couldn't find what fit the questions in the chapter. Like power can be grown. Human behavior is motivated by self-interest. People are basically good and wealthy, and poor can work together. These assumptions for which practice model? I mean, like I found social capital, but I knew it wasn't that. But like the other three, I was reading and looking for something that fits even that wording in the chapter, and I couldn't find it.
Okay. So, I actually think that that's one of the questions that I chose for us to look at today. Let me look back at my PowerPoint real quick. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a minute. Okay. I'm gonna share this. Is this? Oh, I'm not sharing it. Hang on.
Couldn't find this.
Okay. Is this the question? Does this look familiar?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about each of these things. So you said that social capital, you knew that wasn't it, right? So
And the one that I got wrong was psychological sense of community, but I know that wasn't it.
okay. So for this, you the answer. So tell me a little bit more about why you think it's not social capital.
Because I read that one and I couldn't apply it. But I had trouble with chapter 14 just in general. So I don't know if it's just I couldn't apply it. I'm not understanding.
I had trouble as well, but then once I actually thought about it, then I can see where how the answer would come about when I actually put it together and thought about it. I end up finding it on page 423 because I read it too. I read it and I'm like, I'm not
And
understanding. I don't see it. Like, where is it? Oh my God.
Well, I got chapter. Well, no, that's third. I mean, I have it. That particular page folded. Maybe I'm just not applying. Maybe I'm overreading or reading or overthinking.
Yeah, for me. It was easy for me. I realized I'm like, okay, well, I'm looking over it. But when we can't say answers, right? Or no?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can talk about answers here. Yeah.
Okay. I got a consensus organizing.
Okay, let's take a look
Well,
at the book. Can y'all
I,
see my screen now? This is the
Yes.
with the
I'm reading about
text.
consensus organizing now. Yeah. Oh, Lord.
What page did you say, Jasmine?
It was on 423.
I read about consensus in 423, the first chapter. Well,
Mhm.
not the first chapter, but
Yeah.
There
So
it
these
goes.
are the the assumptions of consensus organizing. And
oh,
you can see how it aligns here
yep.
with the power. Give you like
One, I was in the wrong chapter,
yeah, and
chapter 13,
yeah, to
and
give you
now I see it.
yeah, to give you some
All
context with this question, so social movements can be hard to grasp conceptually because they are kind of nebulous and it can be hard to know where they start and where they stop because a lot of times they're more unorganized and a lot of times they are what we'll call grassroots, the grassroots that form an organization. So it's kind of that movement and energy that comes uh, to create a change or to create awareness, to move things forward, but it might not be quite organized yet. Consensus organizing. So this is something that you'll learn more about throughout the MSW program, especially in 7506, which is one of your advanced macro classes. But consensus organizing is really where you are making it participatory. So, bringing people who live in the communities that you're working in or who are, stakeholders for a certain issue to come together and for all of, that lived experience to be part of the organizing. And instead of it being, something that is just decided by one person, it is, something that is decided by the group as a whole. And so because it's decided as the group as a whole, we can give, more power to people who traditionally, are disenfranchised or disempowered. All right. Okay, so we've talked about those. Do you guys just want to jump into questions or do you have other and going through the questions and answers, or do you want to ask other questions about general final exam or reflection project too?
I have a question.
Yeah,
Oh, I
you can
was
you
making
can
sure.
yeah.
I didn't know if I had took it off of mute. About I think I have it, but I want to just make sure about the greater use of technology is associated with all of the following, except I was kind of confused with that one.
Okay. Um, so the questions that you guys get on your quizzes um, are from a test bank. So there are many questions that are similar. This is why, like on the quiz revisions, I asked for so many details because it can be kind of hard to know which one specifically you're talking about. Um,
right.
yeah. So do you have all of the options there that you could read off?
Yes.
Or okay.
Uh-huh. I have one of them is dependency on neighbors for companionship. The other one, core discussion networks, non-kin networks, and diversity in social networks.
Okay.
We
But
all
I
get,
kind of broke it down
we all get the same too.
because I did look at, I found the page number it was on. That's what I was saying. Like you have to read, if you read it, because it says greater use of technology, and then it said the ones that increase. Well, I saw that the ones that declined was the core discussion network. It declined. It had dropout with no confidant. Then the one it said dependency on neighbor companionship. It was 25% less likely. And and it says more non-kin networks. So I end up choosing the diversity in social networks because it said 20% more
Mhm.
diverse, because the question said greater use of technology. So I kind of weeded it out. Is that
Mhm.
the appropriate process? I don't.
Yeah, it is to weed things out. Sometimes it right now, honestly, with talking, about it, it's kind of hard for me to think about all of it at once right now without having it written in front of me. Could you maybe email me about this one so that I can look into it, especially since it's one that's from your quiz?
Yeah, sure,
Okay.
I can. So, and as far as like when the quiz revisions, um, that's the type of information I should put on there as to explain why I came up with the answer and
Right.
everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where you would explain, and if you're, having trouble with finding it, to explain, how you came up with it and what you know about the question. That's what I want.
Oh,
I'm really trying to assess with the revisions, is that you understand the underlying concept that's there.
Okay.
And like, I said before, for the quiz, for the final exam, um, the questions are going to be a little more refined than the questions from the quizzes. It's going to be a smaller pool of questions that I'm going to choose from, but they also may be familiar ones that you've seen before. They may be ones that you've seen here today that we'll talk about. And they might be ones that are borrowed from the examples from that you and your classmates came up with for extra credit. So that, should help with some of the I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question right. And then also, if it's a bad question, like I said before, there's gonna be some more of just taking bad questions out rather than doing the revisions and having you guys share your knowledge. Um, that I'll, be doing a more in-depth analysis of what questions people missed and which ones seemed confusing and that sort of thing. So I'm hoping that that'll help because, I want you guys, to practice this for the experience of the test taking for the license exam, but that's secondary to, really knowing that you understand the material. And so I don't want you guys to get too caught up in the test taking part. And that shouldn't be, um, a barrier to you doing well on the final. So does that help
yeah.
a little?
I'm just,
Yes, it does.
Okay. And we're going to go through some together too. So even though we won't, maybe do your exact question, we'll go through them, some other ones, so you can kind of see the process.
Okay.
And I will go back and try to, if you send me that question or you put it in your revisions, I'll go back and look into it because I see that Emily said that she was having some trouble understanding that question too. So, all right. You guys want to just go ahead and go through the questions now, or um, are there other things that you guys want some clarification on?
Collective action, because because it was seem like it was a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
I got it kind of confusing.
Mm-hmm. So collective action is usually kind of considered a broader term. So, to describe to describe social movements. Um, let's go. I'm gonna pull up the book where we can look and see these see the material while we're talking about it. Do you guys still see the book, or do you see the me or the PowerPoint?
I see you.
Okay, you see me. Okay, here we go. Did collective action, did that come up in communities or in social movements? I can't remember now because they're
Social movements.
wait, say that
Social moves. I
social.
get it. Yeah, it came up in social movements. Um, I get the how the collective action come about, but then some of the examples
Mm-hmm.
were kind of like they just it would go from kind of broad in between, not really direct, because it would go from I forgot how they worded it.
Are you talking about collective action or collective efficacy?
Collective action.
I didn't print out. Do we have a test 6?
Yeah. So collective action is, like I said, it's really more of a general term that's used to, you know, to talk about social movements. So, um, right. So, I mean, it's really, the actual things that the people in the social movements do. So, I mean, you could say that collective action is could be a protest. It could be a um, awareness campaign. It's really kind of like a synonym for intervention at the social movement level. So that's kind of what they're talking about with their examples here whenever they say collective action. Um, does that help you to understand a little bit more about what that term means?
Yes. So it can be anywhere from go small, something small like a social, like a little protest versus to something a little bigger, maybe.
It's it's
Could be
really
a range of things.
it could, yes, it's more of an umbrella term. But what it but the types of interventions that it's talking about are whenever people come together to um for whether it's the purpose of awareness or it's the purpose of trying to change something. So for instance, like changing a verdict of a trial, or it could be more general of uh, of asking for you more general kind of things. It's really more of a blanket term for those interventions. So yes, it could be a protest. It could be it's really
So if
a general definition term.
Okay.
whatever this is, won't be the answer, and it'll be collective.
All right, so keep the questions coming in the chat. If you have them, I'm gonna go ahead and start going through these questions. Um, and like I said, if you have questions, just put it in the chat box, and I'll be checking that periodically. Um, okay. This one, share this. Okay. Can you guys see my screen now? Or yes? No? Can y'all see it? Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. So the questions are gonna go from earlier questions to later questions as far as chapters go. So the first one is from chapter 1, and it says blank refers to a feature that can be focused on separately, but also needs to be understood by considering other features. A culture, B life events, C dimension, or D life force. So for these, I'm gonna give you guys a pause, and then I'll give you the answer and we'll talk about it. If you have a question, like I said, don't hesitate to put it in the chat. Okay.
It's a feature that can be
So
separately, but also needs to be understood considering other features.
say that again.
I was reading aloud. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay, gotcha. All right. So for this one, the answer is C, dimension. So that's really what chapter 1 is all about, is the dimensions. So looking at the dimensions of the person and the environment, and how the person dimension has dimensions even within it. But what this question is getting at is that even though we separate them out into dimensions to talk about them more easily, that we really can't talk about either one without considering the other. So, for example, like when we were talking about biological biological aspects of the person, that is entangled with psychological aspects of the person. It's entangled with the environment and with the person's family. So we can call them dimensions, so we can talk about them separately, um, and identify them, but in reality, they're all really related, and we can't just study um, a biology of a person without considering all of those other factors and dimensions. Oop. Okay. Theories are a form of blank that lay out general abstract assertions that we can use to generate specific hypotheses to test in unique situations. Is it A, assumptions, B, inductive reasoning, C, propositions, or D, deductive reasoning? So for this one, we would say that A and C are what's called distractor. So they look like they could be the right answer because they are terms that go along with the definition of theories, but they're really there to distract you. The answer is going to be either B or D. This question's really asking about the type of reasoning here, and wanting to see if you know the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning. And for this example, this is oh crap. Sorry. This is an example of inductive reasoning. I can't find my answer here. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so I apologize for that. Okay, so sorry for about that. I looked at this answer and I went completely blank on it when I know this answer. It is an example of deductive reasoning. The reason why is because that is how theories are usually generated. So There's two different lines of thinking in research. One is more inductive and the other is deductive. And it has to do with the iterative process of things. And so for deductive reasoning, it's more general and abstract, and it's what we use to come up with specific hypotheses for things. So whenever we are thinking about research or about what might inform our practice or what kind of um, intervention that we'd use with a client, um, we have a hypothesis, and usually that is how we get started to generate knowledge. But those hypotheses should be based on a theoretical perspective. Okay, let's go
So
to
the answer was deductive reasoning or inductive?
it's deductive. It's deep.
Deductive.
It's
Okay.
deductive. Yeah.
Mhm. So that was a more general. Okay.
Okay.
General reasoning. We can just generate. Okay.
Okay. So the next one, patterns of group differences refer to A, inequality, B, heterogeneity, C, genetic factors, D, diversity. Again, we have some distractors here. The distractors would be inequality, because we know that doesn't really fit here. It does talk about differences, but it's inequality really refers to there being an imbalance in those differences. B, heterogeneity does it doesn't fit here because that is referring to how things are different, but it's not looking at the it's looking at how things are the same. It's looking at how things are different, but it's not looking at patterns. So C is genetic factors, which is another distractor, which leads us to D, diversity, which is the answer for this question. Um, so diversity is whenever we have patterns of group differences. Okay, the next questions are starting to go into chapter 2. Um, a theory that defines behavior as the result of reinforcement is A, cognitive social learning theory, B, feminist theory, C, operant conditioning theory, or D, classical conditioning theory. So I'm going to let you guys tell me what you think the distractors are here. Are there distractors that we can rule out?
Feminist theory.
Okay. Yep, I'd agree that that is a so not feminist theory.
Cognitive social learning theory.
Okay, so why should we cross that one out?
Reinforcement.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about reinforcement.
Okay, yeah. And I agree. I think that reinforcement is not cognitive social theory. That's Bandura and him thinking uh, about how behaviors and cognitions go together. So that is not really that is not reinforcement, correct? So we're looking at C and D, operant or classical conditioning. So the difference between those two can be confusing. Classical conditioning is what we refer to whenever a stimulus is paired with a response. So you may think of Pavlov's dogs. It was a famous experiment that was done, and what Pavlov did was he trained his dogs to salivate or to drool whenever he rang a bell. And he did that by pairing the bell with the food. Because usually the dogs would not drool without the presence of the food, but he trained them to drool with just the bell by pairing the bell and the food together. So I haven't said anything about reinforcement yet, and that's because reinforcement doesn't go with classical conditioning. So we can click that one off. Um, and then that leaves us with C of operant conditioning. And that is the right answer is C.
Operant.
Let's see. C. Any questions about that one?
The what I remember. Okay, so classical is the one with the dog.
Yes. It's Pavlov's dogs where he trained them. He paired the bell with the food. So with thinking about classical conditioning, you can think about pairs of things. So the stimulus and the response. For operant conditioning, that's whenever reinforcement and punishment are involved. All right. I wish it was easier to use these draw buttons because it would be so helpful, but then I lose my arrow for my cursor. Um, so sorry, that was kind of all over the place. All right. And it keeps it up there. Great. Okay. All right. Can you guys see the next one now? It says the humanistic perspective is called the third force because it was developed in reaction to A, psychodynamic and behavioral perspectives, B, conflict perspective, C, developmental and constructionist perspective, or D, systems perspective. Which ones might be distractors here?
Well, let's go back to systems perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think systems perspective would be an example of a distractor here.
That's because I just learned that today.
I think that you're right. And also, it's something to think about here with the third force is that these are forces of psychotherapy, what considered forces of psychotherapy sometimes, because they're related to theories that are influential in psychotherapy. So that, can kind of help you think about this too. So it's not systems perspective. We know,
Not developmental and construction.
right,
It's not conflict.
right.
So it'd be the psychodynamic and behavior.
Yep. So it leads us to psychodynamic and behavioral perspectives. And really, psychodynamic is considered the first wave, And then the second force is considered the behavioral perspectives. And usually behavioral and cognitive perspectives are sometimes put together. Once you get into some of your more advanced classes, like advanced direct practice, you'll learn even more, especially about the behavioral perspectives and how there's even three waves within that too that adds on the cognitive part. All right. Why can't I see my cursor?
I just read that last night somewhere.
Okay.
Mental defects and symptoms associated with diagnosis of, I can't read it, mental illness by affecting levels of different insulin is for diabetic.
Let's read all of it because it'd be easy to just look at this question if we're rushing and say that it's insulin. Okay, a medication which affects behaviors and symptoms associated with diagnoses of mental illness and by affecting the levels of specific neurotransmitters and altering the balance. So all of these are medicines, but there's one that does these things. And so which one is it?
Psychotropic.
Yep. So
Psychotropic.
they're called psychotropics. Yep. So D is the answer there. All right. A biological system for which is important for adolescents to develop an understanding of the structures and functions involved, as well as a value base. So we need to look for the one that is particularly important for adolescents. So if we look here, all of these are important to adolescents because they're humans, but there's one that best fits this definition. And that is B, the reproductive system. So in the text, it talks about different sex ed curriculums and which ones are used more in schools. And in chapter 3 too, they talk about how it's important for adolescents to really understand the reproductive system and how important that is for sex ed. So the answer to that one is the reproductive system. It's B. All right. Which region of the brain helps with language, memory, and emotions? So this question is more of a recall question. Um, so it requires you to, have read this information and studied this information about the different lobes of the brain. Does anybody know which one this is?
If I was, either the C or D, I think.
E or B, you said?
D, I said C or D.
Okay.
I know it's in chapter 3.
Maybe B or C. Oh,
Huh?
she said the same thing.
C or D.
Oh, you said C or D?
B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
B.
yeah, that's why I was like kind of stretching my ears to hear you guys if y'all are saying C or D or B or C. But the answer is B. It's temporal lobe.
Oh, I better read some more.
And I just think if you see a way you might be helpful, like temper and emotions, that's just how I remember it. Like I try to put it together that way, temporal lobe, temper with your emotions. I don't know, helps me.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great.
That's a good way. That's why I was thinking about the temple. I was like, okay, I knew it's, but hey, yeah, that's a good way. Good tip.
It definitely is. Thanks for sharing that, Brittany. All right. Okay, so we're moving into chapter 4 now. Uh, and now it gets into, we'll just kind of do one question per chapter. I've loaded it up with more questions for the first few chapters since those have been a while since you've seen those. All right, so a feeling disposition that is stable, less intense, and less tied to a specific situation. And your options are affect, cognition, mood, and emotion. So when I look at these choices, I can see one outlier, um, for sure. Which one do you see as an outlier or distractor? Cognition.
Emotion.
Yeah. So cognition, because it's not related to emotions or feelings. So we know that that is not the one that we're looking for. And so that leaves us with affect, with mood, and with emotion. So we have to think about what we know about these three words. And these are three concepts that people can get confused a lot of times. But generally, an emotion is um, more of a general kind of description of feeling states. Affect has to do with more of the physiological things that you see when you're feeling an emotion. So, for example, whenever somebody's happy, they may laugh and they may smile. It's part of their affect. Then mood is what this question is targeting. It's more stable, it's less intense, it's not tied to a specific situation, um, and it's more general.
Just that's a possibility. Just how the person responds comes for most hospitals in life, but now it's very distressed, overwhelmed. How would you define our current psychological state? Traumatic stress.
Okay, so for this one, um, we have to think about these four things. And this is an example of a question where there may be one answer that seems right, but another one fits better. Um, so the question is asking, how would you define her current psychological state? Um, and we know that she's recently separated, that they've been together for a really long time, and now they're facing a possibility of divorce. She's usually been someone who's been able to cope, but now she's really depressed and overwhelmed and is not able to cope anymore. So that state of overwhelm and the focus on how she shifted should
Mhm.
be a indicator of crisis. We don't know if it's traumatic stress at this point, because traumatic stress usually takes some time to develop and to have symptoms of, and it doesn't necessarily give those specific examples of traumatic stress. Um, is the stress? Absolutely, it's stress, and that is a answer that that she could be stressed, but there's an answer that is even more specific for this, which is crisis. So a crisis is really defined by that shift in coping that it's talking about in this example. And that's why it makes crisis the best answer for this question, even though role strain certainly could be part of this. That she is now being put into a situation where she has to be more independent, or she's living as a single person and not with her husband and her support. That doesn't really answer the question fully. It and it also is not a way to define her current psychological state necessarily. So the right answer here is crisis. It's C. All right. When children have the tools of speech and symbolic representation, they are in which of Fowler's stages of faith development?
I have no idea. I'm gonna have to look it up. Universalize and refers as tools of speech, symbolic representation. They are which final stage of faith of development.
Mhm.
Symbolic representation.
And it's okay to go into your book to look at this. And it's okay, another one strategy that you may think about if you run out of time on test is to just answer all of the questions as best as you can, or even to skip or to flag the questions that you don't know, and then to use your time at the end to go back and to look in the book, to check your answers or to look for the answers that you weren't able to find. So Brittany,
Intuitive?
wait, say that again,
Is it
Brittany.
intuitive?
It is.
Productive faith?
It is because they have gotten past um the literal sense, and now they are able to move into that next stage. You're right, Brittany. It is A. It's intuitive projective. All right. Okay. This one's moving in to, I think this one is chapter 7. Yes. The one that is on environment. And this question says ecofeminism views blank. And
B. Sorry.
um, so A is women as ideal to promote environmental issues. B, the oppression of women and the domination of nature as interconnected. C, women as dominators. D as dominators. And Brittany, you're right on target here. B is the right answer. So the oppression of women and the domination of nature are seen connected. And, if we weren't sure about this, we could also do, the process of elimination here too, and to get that answer. All right. This is a basic kind of definition question. A system of knowledge and beliefs of a particular people, how they construct and employ meanings that guide their perceptions and behaviors in multiple contexts, refers to a society's blank. You can spit it out. It was fine to do that, Brittany. So for this answer, it's really looking to see if you know the definition of culture, and that's what the answer is here. It's culture. Values and traditions, those are part of culture. Ethnocentrism is thrown in there as a distractor, and it could be easy to confuse culture and ethnocentrism, but ethnocentrism really is a specific phenomenon that relates to a person, having their point of view and being kind of centered around their own culture or ethnicity. All right, passing along formal knowledge from one generation to the next and helping to socialize individuals or the functions of which social institution? A, education, B, mass media, C, religion, D, family and kinship.
D.
I would agree that it's D here. I think that some people could maybe get mixed up with A and D because it talks about passing along knowledge. But it is family and kinship because it's passing it down from generation to generation and is looking
Yeah,
at
generation to generation.
right, and it's looking at socialization of individuals. So Emily asked, why is it considered formal knowledge? I think that that is something that is not really essential to the question. So I think that the word formal can throw people off there. Because when you see the formal knowledge, then you would think education, but this is really looking at how the knowledge is passed down. And for formal, I would say that maybe that word is indicating like that it is valuable, that it's real knowledge, because that's also something that's important about family and kinship, that that knowledge, even though it is passed down in a less in this kind of way, that it's still valid, and it still has a place. So I think that it says formal to throw you off with the question. I think it's a test question construction kind of thing. All right. A graphic picture of the family history used by a social worker to get an idea of the extended family's patterns of relationships is called a blank.
Genogram.
Yep. That is right. And so these other ones are here to throw you off again. An eco map is another visual tool or graphic tool that can be used by social workers, but it's used to look at different systems and resources. A social network map, again, is a tool we can use, but not the one that they're talking about. And then family timeline, that is another graphical picture, a graphic picture that we have as a tool, but it doesn't give us the information of the patterns of relationship like the genogram does. So C is the answer there, genogram. All right. Melinda is a part of a local city committee to examine the possibility of building a homeless shelter. This is an example of what kind of group? A mutual aid group, psychoeducational group, task group, self-help group. Yep. I agree. C is the answer, task group. These other examples, you can, one hint that task group is the right answer, just by test taking strategies alone, is that mutual aid, psychoeducation, and self-help all sound like the same thing. So it would, it kind of stands out here, but also, just based on what a task group is that a task group is whenever people are working towards a goal together that is outside of the group itself. So in this example, the committee is the group that's working together to change something for the city. So task group is the right answer here. Schools, correctional facilities, and hospitals are examples of what type of organizations social workers may work in. A, host organizations, B, helping organizations, C, human service organizations, or D, social work oriented organizations. So,
Service.
yep. So C, human service, is the right answer here. And this is a matter of knowing what this term is. And this term is defined, in the textbook and is used in that chapter, and is the term that's commonly used. All right. So this is one that we talked about in the beginning, because I think Angela had a question about this one. But this, we went back and looked in the text to look at this too, and the answer is A, consensus organizing. And they give you these four choices because, these four are related, but they are also different. So in this example, it's consensus organizing, because that is a practice model. Psychological sense of community is not a practice model. That is a construct. So we may measure that whenever we're doing consensus organizing, but it's not something that we do. It's something that is. It's something that we measure. And then also, if you're unsure about this, when we went back in the book, it was pretty clear that there was a section that was on consensus organizing, and it mentioned these these characteristics. And really, the idea of consensus organizing is to be able to give power back to, the people who, to make it more equal, and to give it to the people who the decisions that are going to be made are going to affect them. So for example, with, community organizing in general, this is more of a participatory approach. So taking, if you're going to go into a blighted neighborhood to do some sort of revitalization project, consensus organizing, that model would say, let's talk to the people who live here and let's build their capacity to be able to make changes that they want to see in their neighborhood, versus what happens very often, which is people from the outside, even well-intentioned, churches or universities will come into neighborhoods and say, this is what we think you need. It's because there's a lot of blight here. We need to fix up your houses and that'll fix things. That kind of, it's governmental approach or regulatory approach or expert approach, is what is the opposite of consensus organizing. And that kind of comes up in chapter 14 whenever it talks about the how social work is situated, in actually this might come up in chapters 13 and 14, about how social work is viewed in communities and what kind of roles social work and our profession should have in community work. All right. Okay, I think this is our last question. The profession of social work is an example of a social movement that has become A, factionalized, B, encapsulated, I can't say that word, C, discredited, or D, institutionalized. What do you guys think about this one?
Institutionalized.
Yep. So that's exactly correct. It is de-institutionalized.
Institutional.
Wait, did you have a question, Jasmine?
No, I was saying institutionalized.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
I can't get off of mute fast enough.
I hear you. Yeah. So institutionalized, that's the right answer. All of these other three choices are distractors to throw you off. But this is getting at the concept that we talked about earlier about how a lot of social movements are grassroots efforts. They're more informal, but they can evolve into institutions, or they can evolve into being more formalized, which is what this example is talking about. How, the profession of social work, there wasn't just always a profession, it came out of a social movement. All right. Pretty certain these are all the questions that I have for us to go through. I'm going to take this back so we can, just kind of come together and chat for a few minutes to wrap up. After we've gone through those questions, are there other questions that have bubbled up for you guys?
Not in regards to the test, but I do have to make sure I'm have questions about the reflection
Okay.
project.
Yeah, we've got about 15 minutes, so I'm okay if you have questions about the reflection project for us to talk about them. I imagine that other students might have questions too.
Yeah, I think I know I overthink stuff, but I think I'm kind of confusing myself because it's like I know what to I know how to connect them to myself, but then when it says because I was trying to follow your example,
Mm-hmm.
But I think I was kind of looking for, because it said use like 2 or 3 word terms or something, and then the concepts. But I go back to each. It's like I go back to each chapter to see the concepts, and I'm picking some of the concept things out of those. Is that the correct process? Because I'm like, okay, I may be doing something wrong.
Might be easier to just think about it more generally first. So, for example, looking at the biological dimension, to just kind of reflect on that and think about in general, like how does it connect? Then, based on what you come up with, of how it affects you, then that's when you would go back into the chapter and look and see, okay, what concept is this, where did this come from, because you're going to be making connections on your own in your head, and once you do that, then you can go back to the book and see, okay, well, what is that called, to put it into your description of things. And it's helpful, if I've told several students this, if you draw attention to it, so you can bold, the words if you want to draw attention to that term. So you're like, hey, Dr. D, this is what, this is the term I'm using. So I don't you know miss it, because even though um I can look at it and see it, I want to know very clearly that you know what concept you're talking about, and how you're connecting it to your personal experience.
Because that's all I was trying to do with the example. So it's the terms at the back of the book, right? Of the chapters, because I'm going all over the place.
So
I think I'm over.
yeah, so concepts and terms are general. So, like, I'm asking for you to take ideas from the book. If it's helpful for you to have a list like that, then sure, you can use, the terms that are highlighted in the book, or bolded in the book, or the list of those terms, if that's helpful for you.
But if we don't necessarily have to, as long as we can connect it. But I know we have to use like the theories, the frame, I mean, the perspectives and things. But if we can connect it,
Right. So you should still be using like the terminology that's from the book. So it doesn't have to be those exact terms that are on that list, but it
right?
should be, the ideas that are from the book. Yeah.
I'm like, I sit there like a lot, just over. I say I have to be overthinking it. It just this cannot be this hard for me to try and put this stuff together, because I'm like, I understand how to connect them, but then when I try to format it and put it down, that's when it's the problem. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my
I,
god, this.
yeah, I'd encourage you to do some free writing then. So to just like take the prompt of what the dimension is and just to write for a little while, or even just to reflect and think, um, or to record yourself talking about it. So that you can kind of capture all of the things that you're thinking, and then to take it to the book to find, the terminology to insert there, so for example, from my example with the biological things, I might say, uh I might have written down, oh, I thought, oh, I use hearing aids. And I'm like, that's a great example of how it's connected. And then I was like, okay, so now how do I write that as a term or a concept from the book? And that's whenever I, found the interaction between biology and the interior and exterior systems. And so that was, my concept was the the interior and the exterior environments. Does that help? I think that you're right, that you're probably overthinking it. So, doing something to kind of release the anxiety from it, and to give you like a good place to start and lots of good meat would be to do some sort of like free writing, I think.
Okay, that's something I'm gonna try it because I'm like I can put them together, so I just need to go. I think that would be easiest.
And I think it'll help you with maybe feeling like you have something done too, I know whenever I was a student, I had lots of anxiety about writing papers and about projects and things. And I would just stare at the screen and be like, I don't have anything.
I
There's no
know.
script here. So just get all of your words out is my advice, and then to go back and to pair it with the terms from the book.
Right, because I was going back to read, I was going back to listen to your I was going back again, like listening to the lectures and taking notes and going back to notes I already had, and I'm like, this can't be this hard. It cannot be. I don't see it being this hard. I have to be over analyzing this. I
Yep.
say I have hours and hours. I'm like this. I just don't have nothing, but like the definitions that I know, and I was literally about to go write definitions for each term, and I was like, I think I'm going to be messing something up.
Yeah, I would start with what you do have. And like you said, I mean, you know how to make the connection. Like, I mean, you've already made comments, today that have made, connections with the concept. So, it's, I know that it's not that. I think that it's probably just some uncertainty or anxiety about, doing it right. And so, um, which is good. It means that you're a conscientious student. But it also can kind of get you stuck sometimes, which it sounds like where the point that you might be at now is the stuck phase. So hopefully the free writing can help with that.
I hope so because I was literally then I printed the example. Then I was like, okay, defining biology. Okay, concept this. And I'm like, well, wait, I have to. I was going to email. He said, he was like, do I have to put it on the side of the comment? And I was like, oh my god, the concept. And I was counting how many concepts you had. Then I go flip through the book. Then I go flip through the concepts. I'm like, okay, this concept me is connected to this, and this is okay. And this I see this term, and yeah, I think I was all over the place.
Yeah, but no, it sounds like you're on the right track. It sounds like you also might have had the question too about what the concept or term what that means, and other students have asked me that too. So, if it helps you to use the list that are in the chapters, then that's fine with me. But it's really just any idea that comes from the textbook.
I was like, I was like, wait, concept two or three. I said, where do we get this from? And I was like, oh, okay, so I have to go back to the front of the page. Okay, well, then go to the key terms in the back. And I was like, okay, well, how can I make this connect to this and this? Which ones, picking which ones relate to what I have myself. And then, okay, well, I know that goes together. Well, how can I put them all together to make it flow and make sense?
And it's okay if you it doesn't flow, as much as the example. I'll tell you that example took me a really long time to do. To do it, it took a while. I mean, it probably took me maybe at least an hour. I mean, it took me between an hour to 2 hours to do an example. But I bet that if I went to go do all 12 of them, that it would be a lot quicker for me to do now that I've done that first one. So
Yeah,
hopefully
it's really,
you'll
it's a
have
really
a
good.
snowball effect too. And kind of once you get one or two of them done, then you'll get some momentum going.
Yeah, the adverse childhood. That study, that was a really good study. It's very helpful
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
that.
Um, yeah, and I can't remember if I linked the TED Talk for you guys in some of your slides, but and Dr. Harris, she has a book too about the study, and she was, I don't know if she is anymore, the what are the Surgeon General? That's what it's called. She was the Surgeon General of California, and they have used that research to inform their policies now, which is pretty cool. That they're based on that study. Um, yeah, it's a really seminal article for sure.
Yeah, I went to I'm not gonna say maybe like a conference sort of about the I've been to two actually about this the adverse childhood experience. One of them I went for it turns out it was for extra credit, but it turns out to be it was really really good and very interesting. That was the first time I ever heard of it.
Hmm.
And they
I know.
mainly
Um,
about
I know that in Louisiana, that we've had some state funding where there is money for training. So that's probably why that it's free for organizations to have these particular ACE trainers come out and do training about ACEs because it is so important to understand how those early experiences are related to not only mental health issues in the future, but the health issues like you know and the physical health stuff that comes up too.
anything. And it's so weird. Well, it not weird. It's so neat. It's interesting how different things like stress, um, even as a when people are pregnant, it can affect their babies in all the way up until they're adults.
Hmm.
It's just it's some neat information.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
even I use it. I actually tell people about it now when I talk to them. Like, don't try not to get stressed out. You're pregnant. It's like it can affect the baby, and tell different
I
reasons and different.
use that with my husband. I'm like, I'm supposed to be relaxed right now. Yeah, and I think that it helps a lot of moms who are under a lot of stress to give themselves permission to take care of themselves too. Like if it's for the good of their baby, then they might be more likely to slow down or to try to do things to distress. Um, Kind of the same thing of women quitting smoking when they get pregnant and things like that. They wouldn't do it before for their own health, but now with a baby it's um they'll do it.
Right. Yeah.
I, I had some questions just about the intervention portion of the assignment.
Hmm.
In the example that you gave in one of the videos, um, the intervention that you talked about wasn't really something that was in the book, but I'm sure it was from your experience. So for like myself, who doesn't really have that much experience with the actual therapies and things like that, where would you suggest to kind of look for that?
So I would suggest going to the databases to look for that. So what you would really be searching for is, using key terms like, the social issue that you're looking at. So if it was depression or homelessness or, human trafficking, or I mean, there were tons of different social issues from the case studies. I would use that as a keyword, to use the theoretical perspectives that you're interested in, as a keyword. Also, starting broader sometimes can help. So to just do kind of like general, web searches, which will probably bring you to more basic sites. Sometimes it's even helpful to look at things like goodtherapy.com is one, or psychology tools, or some of those kind of websites that are geared towards practitioners, because they'll have like a glossary of different interventions, or kind of break things down a little bit simpler, or have like a list that you can look at.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that that's a good place to start. And then once you have some ideas, then to go back to doing the search in the library's databases.
Okay.
And Professor Dr. D, I have a question about the exam. Does it go up tomorrow or Thursday?
So
It says Thursday the 25th, but I think I don't know.
the dates got a little mixed up because today's Wednesday. So originally this was scheduled for Tuesday. Today is Wednesday, right, guys? Am I
Yeah.
going crazy?
Yes.
Yeah, that's how I think I must have asked like for the date probably like 5 times.
So, right. So today is Wednesday. So the the test is opened tomorrow at 8 a.m.
And our assignment is tomorrow at 11 p.m.
Yes.
Good
But
Lord.
the exam, it's open from 8 a.m. tomorrow until 8 a.m. on Monday. So you have that whole weekend to take it, and to keep studying for it. But once you click on the link to take it, then your time starts ticking and you have 2 hours to take it.
And how many questions are there?
There are 50.
50. Okay.
How are y'all doing at the end of this module with your other classes? Are things smooth or chaotic, or ready
Let's
to
move.
move?
Yes.
No, this is my third one, and I'm just like, my classes have been fine. It's just, I don't know, adding the internship and all the other things, it's just been a little bit of a lot on top of the pandemic, on
Bit
top
of a
of all
lot.
the things. And I'm just like, okay, I need a new module. Not for any, reasons for the teaching, just
Yeah, I know. You need something new. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
module, this is my first year in first module and working full time doing CPS, Child Protective Services, frontline. It's been a challenge.
Yeah.
It is really a challenge.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it is. It's a lot, whenever, especially with working full time or adding the internship. But I like to be y'all's cheerleader and remind you that this is temporary, you guys.
That's
Um,
I'm enjoying learning the beginning of learning it because I can apply it to cases and working with my families. I get a lot out of that, but like just trying to just stay up on things.
mhm. Yeah. All
That's
right.
what I find too. It's a lot. I don't know. I was getting a handle on it, and then I'm like, oh my god, some kind of way I got lost in the midst of it. So I even look, it got so bad. The other day I just woke up and I cut my hair off. I was like, oh my god, it's a lot. I was like, I don't even want to comb hair. I don't want to do anything. I was like,
I feel you. I've definitely been there when I was a student and even not a student. Just feeling overwhelmed with everything. You certainly have a lot on your plate right now, with school and with working. So one thing off your list.
yeah, I just trying. I keep telling myself, okay, it's gonna be better. It's gonna get better. It's not gonna be like this. And just saying good things like you know, you gotta keep forward, keep pushing, keep pushing. Don't
Hmm.
give up. Like you can't give up. You just gotta keep pushing.
Yeah.
'Cause it's really not. I I enjoy it as well. So I don't think it's that bad. I think that once I finally get down with a routine, then it'll probably be better and easier to manage.
Yeah. Yeah. Is this
Yeah.
your first semester too? Your first module?
Yes, it is.
It is.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
So
Um, it can take a little while to get into a groove with things for sure. But like Brittany was saying, you get a new chance every 6 weeks or every 7 weeks, right whenever you're starting to feel overwhelmed, then there's a new module or a fresh start. And that's what I like about teaching online too in these accelerated classes is even if, this module hasn't been the best, there's a new one and a fresh start.
yep, I say after I think I said Monday, I'll take a break and get a chance to just regroup, and then I'll be off and ready to start again.
Yeah.
When do class start back again? Am I
So
the one don't know that?
actually in the middle of a transition with our calendar. Usually it has just been 1 week in between the sessions, but this time there's 2 weeks.
Oh,
Um,
thank you, Jesus.
the next module starts March 15th.
I may be ready to take 2 more classes.
Yay.
Um,
Guys, take the break to do some self-care and taking care of yourselves and like Jasmine said, kind of resetting. Um, because y'all deserve it. Y'all have been working hard, so
I wish we could take you the whole time out. That'd be like so awesome.
that makes my heart so happy that you
well,
said
I am in your next class.
That would be
Your
so
next class
awesome.
full? I don't think I don't.
I don't know. The last time I looked was about a week ago and there were still a couple spots.
It's the same structure because I can handle this. I can
Yeah,
handle
it'll be the same structure, and that there will be the discussion activities. Most of them are going to be actually, I think all of them are going to be focused on the cases though, instead of the um just random, the questions will all be case based. And the setup will be, similar with the lectures, with the quizzes, with a final, with a project. The project is, instead of reflecting on yourself though, is it's a lifespan class. So you're asked to pick a mentor to kind of follow during the 7 weeks, and there's different activities for you to do with them. You could do it in one sitting though. It's like practicing doing an eco map, a timeline, a genogram, and then, and, writing, a reflection on it. So instead of the reflection project in this class, that's what the project looks like.
I know I am probably the only person that is not good with computers, but you emailed me on how to do that, the extra credit that's due on the 28th, I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't what am I think you told me I just need to record what I'm reading or write down what I'm
You're listening to, yeah. So for the transcription, you're
listening.
just gonna listen to the podcast and just type what they say. So the issue that I have is that I don't have written copies of the podcast, and I like to be
So
able to
listen to it.
Mhm.
Also, like the ladies that be talking to me on these chapters and tell her I still didn't understand chapter 14 after listening to her. That's what I'm a write.
But you
That's what I'm a write down.
Yeah. Well, no, you just type what she's saying. So it's
Oh, okay. I type what she's
yeah,
saying.
you just transcribe the podcast. So you're just typing it. Because I don't have them typed out.
Got it.
And I need copies like that. So I'm using my student labor or extra credit labor to do it for
I need it. Well, I want it anyway. Because I was like, I just was not understanding. I say, I just can't. Well, yes, I can. I
Yeah.
was like, I just can't be this dumb. But I was like, but I am, because I'm not getting this. But I understand now. I'm listening to what she's saying and I'm typing down what
Yeah.
I'm just, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think that online sometimes too, whenever, we're reading, instructions on the online class, that it's easy to think things can't be that simple, and kind of second guess yourself, like, is that really what she wants me to do? Kind of like with what Jasmine was talking about with trying to figure out what's a concept or not a concept. I think some of that is just an artifact of it being online too, and us not having as many opportunities to talk like this.
And that's due on the 28th. Okay. Yeah.
Yep, it's due on the 28th. All right.
Okay.
So, do you guys have any other questions for me?
No, thank you for your time.
All right.
I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Right. And if you have other questions, don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
My